this strange to have me playing all of the characters? I know I would be wondering what the deal is with a movie if it only had one actor playing every single role. And yet, there's a certain similarity that this shares with cinema that we see in theaters. All the actors are white, and yet that's never questioned. That is a result of white privilege. Now, before we go any further, let's talk about that term just a little bit. Come on. White privilege can be a bit of a loaded term. So let's start simply and just have a little conversation about what white privilege means and what it is. As we know, white people make a majority of the U.S. population, 60.4%, not including Hispanics, according to the census. So, because these white people make up a majority, they have power. Because of this group holding a majority, they have power. And part of the power that they hold is just simply the fact that they get to write the rules. Because white people form a majority, they have much more say in what the rules are, and inherently, because white people are writing the rules, they benefit more from those rules than people of other ethnicities and racial groups. So that's one of the benefits of being white. That's a white privilege. Beyond a little bit of that systemic understanding of white privilege, let's talk about just a small case. Who is George? So you hear about someone named George. One of the assumptions that comes with being George, or just being a person that someone doesn't know, is that they are usually defaulting to assuming that that person is white. We're going to assume usually that George is white, or at least white people are going to do that. And that is another benefit to white people, because when you meet George, if George is white, then you think, oh, okay, I was right. This is fine. I know this person. But if George isn't white, then he automatically doesn't meet your expectations. So, in this way, white people are benefited just simply from how our minds assume about the people that we're going to meet, especially in the minds of white people. So, how does white privilege impact the film industry? Well, one of the ways that white privilege impacts the film industry is through the hierarchy of power of white privilege. In the film industry especially, talent agencies are known, and studies have shown that talent agencies have hierarchies that build and reward white men. It's because these hierarchies are made up of white men that white men are consistently gaining advantages over other groups of people in these groups. So actors are more likely to be represented by a white man than they are by a minority, which is going to favor white actors. And so this helps to make Hollywood more white. As we can see, Hollywood already exists as a very white industry, as we can see in the number of white people on these film covers. The fact of talent agencies having a known hierarchy of privileging whites is compounded by the perception in producers and studios that white people won't go and see movies that have predominantly minority casts. This perception is corroborated by some studies, but a study by Weaver and Frampton showed that perception and interest in a movie in white people, even if it has a minority cast, can be changed by hearing positive reviews from other white people. So, the interest of people and white people is malleable. So, what danger does it pose to have this rampant whiteness in Hollywood? Let's take a second to look at Wes Anderson. He's a filmmaker whom I love, but Wes has very white movies, as you can see. So, what's the problem with Wes Anderson having such white movies and whiteness being so prevalent in the film industry? Well, for one thing, having white people in films normalizes the existing predominance of white people in media, and it reduces representation of other minority groups. And additionally, whiteness is defined by society. So the way that white people are represented in media and in film is important because it helps to define who is white in our society, and it defines who gets those privileges that we've already talked about. Anderson specifically has issues with this, as Anderson consistently portrays minorities as subservient characters to the white characters. They often play stereotypical roles. In his film Bottle Rocket, Anderson portrays a character, Inez, who, without Anderson's definition of her as Paraguayan and as a maid, the viewer wouldn't necessarily view Inez as a minority, but through the course of the film, Anderson takes this person who looks like they could be white and defines them as a minority. In this way, Anderson is narrowing what he defines to be white and what is defined to be white in media. And he's reducing the amount of people who can reap the privileges that come with white privilege. While many films focus on white narratives, this isn't true for all films. Zootopia, for example, an animated children's movie about an animal society, attempts to confront implicit biases and teach children about how those implicit biases can affect society through its portrayal of predator-prey dynamics. This is good of Zootopia, however, their portrayal of biases is a little bit watered down and caters to a white audience. In this way, Zootopia is a step in the right direction, but it still shows what can be improved in our portrayal of racial narratives in films. This is important, and it's important to diversify Hollywood and diversify film. But how do we do it as a viewer? The first step is to acknowledge the biases that exist and to acknowledge white privilege as real and as a problem in society and in film. Plus, as a film goer, it's important for you and for me to go out and see films that feature minority-centric casts, because we can show Hollywood that minority-centric casts can succeed as films. So, we can reduce the amount of whiteness that we see in films this way and portray other narratives. Through these ways and through the acknowledgement of white privilege in film, we can work to write new rules for film.